There's a crumpled paper napkin sitting in my sock drawer, beige, stained with raspberry jam, and barely holding together after all this time. On it, in her messy handwriting, it says, "You make the world soft again. Don't change." It was from my 34th birthday. She handed it to me at brunch, smiling like we had our whole lives ahead of us. I thought it was romantic. I thought it meant something. 3 months later, she left. No note this time. Just silence. I wasn't planning to write this, but a few nights ago, I found that napkin again while digging for a matching sock. And when I held it, it didn't make me cry. It made me furious. Because here's the truth, she wanted me soft. She just didn't want to be with someone soft. And if you think this is another sad post about a man realizing too late that his wife never really loved him, it's worse. Much worse. Because I didn't just lose her. I lost the version of myself I thought she saw. The version I desperately tried to be. Let me walk you through the beginning of the unraveling. Not the first date, not our wedding, not even the day she walked out. No. This started in a shoe store. That's right. A dumb shoe store. It was a Saturday afternoon. She wanted new heels for some party her coworkers were throwing. I sat on that little cushioned bench like a tired dog, watching her try on pair after pair, each one more uncomfortable than the last. And then she asked the sales guy what he thought. He said something like, "Those ones definitely suit you. Elegant and sharp." And she smiled at him in a way I hadn't seen in months. I know. It sounds ridiculous. Insecurity over a pair of shoes? But that moment, that tiny flicker of connection between two strangers, it stayed with me. Like a splinter in my brain. After we got home, I asked her if she liked how he complimented her. She laughed. Actually laughed. "Don't be so weird, Jules." He was being polite. But something shifted after that. Not in her, in me. I started paying attention. The text she typed and quickly deleted. The way she locked her phone even in the kitchen. The fact that she started showering at night. I told myself I was imagining things. That marriage just goes through phases. That people drift and then drift back. But the universe wasn't done humiliating me. Not yet. Because just before everything exploded, she invited me, of all people, to a reunion brunch with her old college friends. And what I saw there, what I heard, it didn't just confirm my fears. It redefined everything. The napkin. The shoes. The looks. Even the woman I thought I married. But I'll get to that soon. First, you need to know what I found 2 nights before the reunion in our laundry hamper. That's where the truth really started bleeding through. 2 nights before the reunion, I was doing laundry, not because I'm domestically disciplined, but because I couldn't sleep and folding towels feels safer than folding thoughts. Mallory had been out again. Some after-hours work dinner, she said. I'd stopped asking questions at that point. Her answers were always the same, crisp, practiced, like she'd rehearsed them in the car before walking through the door. I reached into the hamper, grabbing a bundle of clothes that still held the warmth of her skin. And then, right there between her sweater and my hoodie, was a shirt I didn't recognize. It was a men's t-shirt. Gray. Soft. Expensive. Not mine. I held it up. No tags. No cologne. No obvious stains. But the size was off, and so was the fact that I'd never seen it before. I stood in the laundry room under the yellow ceiling light, staring at it like it was a live grenade, not a piece of cotton. And in that moment, my mind exploded in 10 different directions. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was mine, and I'd just forgotten. Maybe it belonged to her brother from when he visited. But he hadn't been in town for over a year. And I don't forget things. Not like that. Especially not when it comes to Mallory. I was the one who always noticed the smallest details, the way she tied her hair when she was stressed, the exact degree she tilted her head when lying. Still, I folded the shirt and placed it neatly on top of the washer, like it hadn't just detonated something inside me. And then I did something that I'm not proud of. I opened her side of the closet. You see, I'd always believed that respecting space meant trust. I never checked her phone, never dug through drawers, never even read her diary when she used to write in one. But standing in that laundry room, holding a shirt I couldn't explain, I felt like a man who had been left out of his own life. Inside her closet, everything was as expected, neat rows of blouses, work pants, dresses. But there was a shopping bag stuffed in the back, behind her winter coats. When I pulled it out, I found tissue paper wrapped around what looked like a silk dress. Not one I'd ever seen her wear. Red. Short. Price tag still on. It wasn't for me. I knew that without even asking. Mallory hated red. At least, that's what she told me. She said it made her feel too seen. But this dress was made to be seen. And suddenly I knew, somewhere out there, someone else was seeing her. Someone else was hearing the laughter I used to hear in the kitchen on slow Sunday mornings. Someone else was now getting the spark in her eyes that used to be mine. I closed the closet, put the bag back, and walked out of the room like a ghost. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room until the sky turned pale, trying to convince myself I still had time to fix this. That maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. But then came the reunion. She invited me like she was inviting a +1 to a wedding she wasn't excited to attend. "You don't have to come," she said with that flat tone. "But the girls are expecting you." I said yes, because part of me still wanted to believe I mattered to her, even if it was just for show. We arrived late. She walked ahead of me like I was her assistant. Everyone was already laughing at the table, the kind of laughter that comes from shared secrets. I saw familiar faces and unfamiliar tension. Mallory kissed a woman on the cheek, hugged another. Then someone called her name from the other end of the restaurant, and she turned, and so did he. He was tall, tan, and too comfortable. His eyes went right past me, straight to her. And her smile? It wasn't the one she gave to me. It was brighter, lighter, reckless. She walked over and hugged him. Too long, too familiar. I stood there with a dry mouth and hands gripping the back of a chair, watching my wife wrap herself around another man like I wasn't even there. I wanted to speak, to shout, to leave, but I stayed. I sat. I smiled like an idiot. Because that's what you do when you realize you're the last one to get the joke, and the joke is your life. What happened next was worse than anything I had imagined, because he didn't just know her. He knew me. I didn't catch his name at first. I was too busy trying to keep my hands from shaking under the table. But I remember the way he looked at me, not with surprise or discomfort, but with familiarity, like someone who had already made peace with his part in my destruction. He was wearing a sleek dark jacket, nothing flashy, but his presence was loud in every way. The kind of guy who always seemed to know which fork to use at brunch, who'd never doubt himself walking into a room full of strangers. The opposite of me. Mallory returned to the table with him, placing her hand on his back as casually as someone would adjust a loose picture frame. And when she introduced me to the group, she said, "This is Julian," with the same tone someone might use to present a boring exhibit at a museum, a fact, not a person. Then she turned to him and said, "Oh, I don't think you've met." But the lie was already unraveling. He extended his hand to me and smiled, that tight, rehearsed kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Julian, right? Heard a lot about you." There it was. Those 6 words. Heard a lot about you. They dropped between us like a stone in a still pond. Heard, from whom? When? Why? I tried to play it cool. I shook his hand and forced a laugh that probably sounded more like a cough. "Yeah? Nothing too embarrassing, I hope." Mallory didn't look at me. She was already sipping her mimosa and pretending she hadn't just detonated the entire evening with that one slip. I spent the next 20 minutes pretending I was part of the group, nodding along to inside jokes and sipping water because my throat had gone bone dry. Every time someone brought up something Mallory used to do back in the day, I noticed him glance at her like he already knew, not from stories, but from shared memories. I kept trying to find holes, trying to tell myself I was being paranoid. Maybe he was just from her gym, or work, or one of those weird networking mixers she always claimed were boring as hell. But then came the toast. One of her friends, Miranda, I think, stood up with her champagne glass and said, to Mallory, "For being the boldest of us all, to living on your own terms. You've always had the guts the rest of us envied." The table clinked their glasses. Cheers all around. I stared at Mallory. She didn't flinch. She clinked her glass with his and smirked. I didn't recognize the woman sitting next to me anymore. She wasn't my wife. Not even a version of her. She was a stranger wearing her skin. When she went to the restroom, I finally got a chance to speak to him directly. "You said you'd heard a lot about me," I said, doing my best to sound conversational. "Where from, exactly?" He smiled like a man who'd already decided how the conversation would end. "Mallory. She talks about you all the time." That should have been reassuring. But the way he said it, like I was the subject of a private joke, made my stomach twist. "She's lucky to have someone so loyal," he added. Loyal. Not loved. Not admired. Not respected. Loyal. He leaned back in his chair and looked me dead in the eye. Most guys wouldn't still be around after everything. After everything? I wanted to ask what that meant. I wanted to stand up and scream, "What the hell do you know that I don't?" But I didn't. I just sat there, frozen, Because for the first time, I realized something I should have known a long time ago. I wasn't the husband in this story. I was the audience. When Mallory came back, she kissed his cheek. Right there. In front of me. She said it was a joke, just some silly thing from college they used to do. Everyone laughed. Everyone but me. I excused myself from the table. Told them I needed some air. In truth, I needed to figure out how I'd let myself get erased from my own life without even noticing. But when I stepped outside, something unexpected happened. One of the women from the table, someone I didn't know very well, followed me. Her name was Nora. She looked nervous. She asked if I was okay, and I said something like, just needed a breather. She hesitated, bit her lip, and then she said the one sentence that shattered everything. You really don't know, do you? I turned toward her. Know what? Her face went pale. I thought she told you. I thought it was. I mean, you're her husband, right? I nodded. She looked away for a moment, then met my eyes again. She's been seeing him for over a year. I didn't respond. I didn't blink. I didn't move. She continued, almost whispering now. We all thought you knew. We thought maybe you had some arrangement or... I don't know. But he's not just some fling. They've been together. Like, really together. And then she said something I will never forget. She told us you were okay with it. That you knew and stayed because you loved her that much. That was the moment I realized the truth wasn't just being hidden from me, it had been rewritten. And Mallory? She was the one holding the pen. I don't remember walking back to the table. I don't remember saying goodbye, or if I even did. I think I mumbled something to Nora, probably thanks, or I see, or some equally useless phrase. But my legs carried me back to the car while my brain tried to detangle everything I had just heard. The world around me became background noise, like someone had hit mute on reality while the volume inside my head grew louder and louder. She told them I knew, that I approved, that I just quietly stood in the corner of my own marriage and watched her build a second life with another man, while I waited like some loyal old retriever at the back door. The more I thought about it, the more things started falling into place. The way her friends had looked at me, not with suspicion, but with pity. That shallow kindness, that distant politeness. They didn't think I was clueless. They thought I was spineless. The husband who'd swallowed his pride so deeply he'd forgotten how to chew. And maybe I had. Because the truth is, I gave Mallory space. I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I gave her the silence she used as a canvas for lies. And in return, she gave the world a version of me I didn't recognize, a man who accepted betrayal with a nod, who watched his marriage burn down and politely offered more matches. That night, I didn't confront her. I didn't demand answers. I went home alone, even though we drove there together. I sent her a text that said, took a cab. Don't wait up. She didn't respond. I sat in our living room, or what used to be ours, staring at the framed photo on the wall. One of those professional engagement shots, her in a blue dress, my arm around her waist, both of us laughing like we had some clue what forever meant. I took it down, not out of anger, but because it felt like a photograph of strangers. And then I went at her computer. I know how it sounds. But you reach a certain point in betrayal where dignity isn't your highest priority anymore. I just wanted truth, even if it hurt, even if it destroyed whatever scraps of self-worth I had left. She hadn't logged out. Her messages were open. I wasn't prepared. There weren't hundreds of texts. There were thousands, stretching back over a year and a half, between her and him. His name was Colton, a name I'd never heard, never seen in our life before, and yet he appeared like a ghost in every corner of her digital world. Nicknames, private jokes, photos, nothing graphic, but intimate in a way that stabbed harder than anything explicit. A birthday selfie of her in that red dress I found in the closet. Him replying, "You look so much better when you're not playing wife." What hit harder than the messages was the language. Not just the content, the tone, the freedom. She was lighter in those texts. She was someone else. No hints of annoyance. No cold distance. No clipped replies. She teased him. She complimented him. She called him my safe place. I stared at that for a long time. My safe place. That was mine. That was supposed to be mine. And then I saw the part that finally broke me. A message from just a few weeks earlier. Sent late at night, while I was sleeping next to her. He asked me if we're okay. Per Jules. I almost feel bad lying to him. But I guess if you won't leave, it's not my problem. No. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even move. I just sat there as my face flushed hot, then cold, then hollow. The truth was right in front of me, And it wasn't messy or complicated. It was clean, cruel, final. Mallory had rewritten me into a supporting character, a shadow of a man she could step over on her way to excitement. And I let her. I gave her every tool she needed. I didn't demand space. I didn't set boundaries. I didn't ask questions. I trusted. And she used that trust as a ladder to climb out of our marriage and into someone else's arms. But the worst part wasn't the cheating. It wasn't even the lying. It was that I had become a story she told at parties, a quiet little joke shared over cocktails, a character her friends pitted, the man too soft to see the fire behind the smoke. And I wasn't going to let her finish telling that story. No. If she wanted the world to believe that Julian was nothing more than her quiet, harmless, oblivious husband, then I'd be the one to deliver the final chapter in front of all her friends. The next morning came slowly, like it was dragging its feet to meet me. I hadn't slept, not really. I must have dozed off on the couch for an hour or two because I woke with the imprint of the remote control pressed into my forearm and a sour taste in my mouth. The photo of us, the one I'd taken down the night before, was lying face down on the carpet. I didn't remember dropping it, but it felt fitting. Mallory still wasn't home. She didn't call, didn't text. She didn't have to. She probably thought I was still too passive to act. Still the same man who would sweep her broken promises under the rug, then vacuum around the rug so she wouldn't have to feel bad. Maybe that's who I had been, but not anymore. I started packing. Not the kind of packing you do when you're moving out, the kind you do when you're leaving the version of yourself that's been too quiet for too long. I didn't throw anything. I didn't yell. I folded every shirt with slow precision, each one like a step back toward sanity. I wasn't sure where I was going yet, but I knew I couldn't stay here. Not one more night. But before I left, I had one more thing to do. Mallory had one more big social event on the calendar, a second reunion, this time for her new department at work. One of those rooftop cocktail parties where people dress like they're in a Netflix series and pretend they're not all secretly competing for validation. She'd been buzzing about it for weeks, telling me what dress she'd wear, which shoes made her look expensive. I had smiled and nodded back then, clueless and eager to please. But now, I had something else in mind. That morning, I opened a new email account. I gathered screenshots of the worst messages. Nothing graphic. Nothing crude. Just raw truths. Her lies, her jokes at my expense, her words about Colton that shattered everything I thought our marriage was. Then I crafted a message. Not angry. Not petty. Just honest. Mallory has every right to live the life she chooses. But she doesn't get to erase the one she built on a lie. Some of you believed I knew. I didn't. Some of you thought I was okay with it. I wasn't. I'm not here to shame her. I'm just here to finally tell my side. Attached her messages I wasn't meant to see. I'm not asking for sympathy. Just clarity. Sincerely. Julian, the man she never expected to speak. I didn't send it yet. I saved it in drafts. Because it wasn't time. That evening, Mallory came home like nothing had happened. She was humming. She walked past me in the hallway with her phone in one hand, a smoothie in the other. Didn't even ask where I'd been the night before. I followed her into the bedroom and said, "Hey." She glanced at me. "Yeah, I was thinking I might join you at the party this weekend. Unless you'd rather I didn't." She smiled, but her eyes narrowed. "Of course you can come," she said slowly, like someone unsure whether they were being set up. "I mean, it's just boring work people." I nodded. Still, might be nice to show up together. She turned back to her mirror, brushing her hair. "If you want," she said, her voice drifting off like a leaf in the wind. That was all I needed. The next 2 days were a blur of fake smiles and suppressed adrenaline. I played my part well. I made small talk. I cooked dinner. I even bought her a bottle of wine she liked and watched her sip it while texting God knows who from the couch beside me. I was collecting the final moments. The last footage of a film I was about to end. The night of the party, she wore the red dress. Not the one I remembered from her messages. A different one. Shorter. Tighter. Designed for attention. She didn't ask me if I liked it. She didn't need to. She wasn't dressing for me. As we arrived, she introduced me to people I'd never met but who clearly already knew me. Or at least, knew the version she'd been circulating behind my back. Their handshakes were polite, their smiles too rehearsed. I could see it in their eyes, the mix of discomfort and curiosity. Is that really him? They seemed to wonder. The one she kept around like a sentimental keychain? Colton was there too. Of course he was. And when our eyes met, he didn't flinch. He raised his glass slightly, like we were old war buddies sharing a secret. Mallory glanced between us, but said nothing. She didn't need to. Her world was intact. Her version of the story still held. Until I spoke. I waited until everyone was gathered near the bar, someone giving a speech about quarterly growth or future projections or something else that didn't matter. I stood off to the side, watching Mallory laugh with Colton's hand barely grazing the small of her back. It was subtle, but not subtle enough. I pulled out my phone and opened the email. I hit send to all. Then I looked up at her and smiled. I didn't yell. I didn't create a scene. I just walked past her, tapped her lightly on the shoulder, and said, "Check your phone when you get a second." Her smile faded. "What? You'll want to see it before anyone else does," I said. "Oh, and thanks for the napkin. I finally realized what you meant." And with that, I walked away, not just from her, but from the entire version of myself that believed silence was strength. The fallout would come quickly, but I was ready for it. The walk from the rooftop down to the street felt like floating. I didn't hear the music. I didn't hear the laughter. Just the quiet hum of something ending, not violently, but with complete precision. Like I'd closed a door behind me that had once led to the rest of my life. When I stepped outside, the cold hit me instantly. I hadn't even brought a jacket. I guess I wasn't thinking about the weather when I planned my escape. I stood there for a few seconds beneath the city lights, surrounded by strangers hailing cabs and scrolling through their phones, completely unaware that a grenade had just gone off 4 floors above them. I didn't look back. That was the only rule I made for myself that night. No looking back. I walked 2 blocks before I finally allowed myself to sit down, a bench outside a closed bookstore, of all places. And that's when it began. My phone lit up. 1 notification. Then 3. Then 12. Mallory hadn't replied. But others had. The first message came from Miranda, one of the louder voices from that reunion dinner, the one who toasted Mallory for being bold. It simply read, "Julian, I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was like that." Then came Nora. "She's melting down. You should have seen her face. She just stormed out with Colton chasing after her like a wet dog." Another text. This one from an unknown number. "I respected you before. I admire you now." I didn't know who sent that one. I didn't care. For the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. I wasn't defending my choices. I wasn't standing in the middle of some emotional courtroom, arguing for the right to feel hurt. The truth had spoken. And for once, it didn't whisper. I stayed on that bench for nearly an hour. I watched the city keep moving, indifferent to my small war. Somewhere above me, Mallory was probably scrambling, spinning new lies, trying to salvage her narrative. But it was too late. The screenshots were out. Her words, her own words, had told the story for me. I thought I'd feel triumph. I didn't. Not exactly. What I felt was release. Not happiness. Not peace. Just a strange kind of stillness. The kind that comes after you've held your breath for so long and finally let it out in one aching gust. That night, I checked into a cheap hotel on the other side of the city. One of those places with scratchy towels and humming radiators. I collapsed on the bed with my shoes still on, letting the fluorescent ceiling buzz above me. At 3:11 a.m., Mallory finally texted, "Why would you do this? You humiliated me." I didn't deserve that. I stared at the screen for a while before responding. And when I finally typed back, I didn't vent. I didn't curse. I just wrote. I didn't deserve any of it. But I survived it. That's the difference. She didn't respond. Not then. Not the next morning either. But she started blocking people. I know because my inbox was full of messages from her friends, asking what had really happened, some offering support, some too embarrassed to pick a side. That afternoon, I received an email from Mallory's boss. It wasn't a scolding or a warning. It was a private message that simply said, "I had no idea. She's taken a leave of absence. I'm truly sorry for your experience, Julian. If you need someone to talk to, professional or otherwise, I'd be happy to connect you to someone." I didn't reply. I appreciated the sentiment, but I didn't need counseling. Not anymore. What I needed now was distance. The next day, I drove back to our apartment, my name still on the lease. I let myself in while she was gone. I packed my last few things. My books. My guitar. The plan I somehow kept alive through all of this. And yes, the napkin. That cursed napkin I once thought was a love letter. I took it not as a keepsake, but as evidence of just how far a person can be manipulated by a single kind word written by the wrong hands. Before leaving, I left her a note. Nothing dramatic. Just this. "You erased me from our marriage. I just returned the favor. Then I walked out, locked the door, dropped the keys in the mailbox. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't her footnote. I was the author now, and my story wasn't over. The funny thing about leaving isn't the act itself. It's everything that follows in the silence. It's waking up in a room where nothing reminds you of her, but your body still moves like she's there. Like muscle memory that hasn't caught up with the truth yet. That's how the first week felt. Even without the apartment, without the framed photo, without her perfume drifting through the hallway, I still found myself hesitating before closing a door too loudly. I still paused before laughing at something dumb on TV, as if she might walk in and roll her eyes at me for it. But she didn't walk in. She never would again. And that was the new reality I had to shape with my own hands. I rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment in a part of the city I'd never lived in. Nothing fancy, a sliver of a place with creaky floors and a cracked bathroom mirror. But it was mine. No ghosts. No rehearsed smiles. Just clean walls and a second-hand couch that sagged in the middle but didn't judge me for anything. On my third night there, I cooked myself dinner, real dinner, not cereal or leftover takeout. I poured a glass of wine. I set the table for one, and I ate in total silence. And you know what? It didn't feel sad. It felt honest. Like I was finally sitting with the only person whose forgiveness I actually needed, myself. That week, the texts started coming in again. Not from Mallory. She'd gone silent. But from her friends, colleagues, even a few mutual acquaintances I hadn't seen since our wedding. Everyone had a reaction. Some expressed shock. Some expressed regret. One even tried to flirt, which was wildly inappropriate and exactly as awkward as you'd expect. But the one that stood out came from an old friend of hers named Elise. We'd only met twice, once at a holiday dinner and once at a trivia night Mallory had dragged me to, where Elise and I had actually carried the whole team while Mallory flirted with the bartender. Elise's message was short. You don't know me well, but I saw it. I just never said anything. I'm sorry. If you ever want to talk, I'd be honored to actually get to know you. The real you. I didn't reply. Not yet. But I stared at that message for a long time. Not because I was interested, but because it reminded me that maybe I hadn't been completely invisible to everyone. And then, one afternoon, I saw her again. Not intentionally. I was walking out of a hardware store with a folding chair under one arm and a stupid little lamp in the other when I heard someone say my name. I turned, and there she was. Mallory. Standing in the parking lot like a misplaced mannequin, her arms folded, hair perfect, eyes sunken with exhaustion she was trying hard to hide. She looked thinner. Or maybe just smaller. We stared at each other for a few seconds. Then she walked over, slow and cautious, like approaching a wild animal. I didn't think I'd run into you, she said, forcing a smile that didn't land. I didn't say anything. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I got your note, she said. The one you left with the keys. Still silent. I deserve that, she added quickly, as if trying to get ahead of whatever punishment she assumed was coming. I didn't expect you to do what you did. You were always the quiet one. There it was. The version of me she still held on to. I was quiet, I said. But not blind. She flinched at that. Good. She looked down, toeing the pavement with her heel. I guess I just thought you'd never leave. I didn't think you had it in you. That sentence stayed in the air between us. The full weight of what she really meant. I underestimated you. I misread you. You were never supposed to stand up. Well, I said, you built your life around that version of me. The one who never walks away. That wasn't love, Mallory. That was convenience. She blinked hard. Maybe to keep the tears from spilling. Maybe just to stop herself from blinking me out of existence. She looked like she wanted to say more. But there wasn't anything left to say. So I left her there. No goodbye. No closure speech. Just a nod, and I kept walking. Later that night, she texted me. I know I don't have the right to ask, but can I call you sometime? I just want to hear your voice again. I didn't respond. She already had my voice. For years. She used it to validate her choices, to paint over her guilt, to make her lies sound less like betrayal and more like unfortunate timing. Now, that voice belonged to me again. And I wasn't giving it back. It's been 6 months since I walked away from Mallory, and even now, when I look back on it all, I don't feel rage. Not pity. Not heartbreak, either. What I feel is something I never thought I'd have again. Clarity. After that last message, the one where she asked to hear my voice, I never replied. I didn't block her. I didn't lash out. I didn't send another truth bomb or final remark meant to sting. I just let the silence speak for me. Because what I realized was that the loudest thing you can do to someone who once underestimated you is to stop explaining, to stop needing them to get it. I gave up on closure. And that's when real healing began. I kept building my new life piece by piece. I furnished my apartment with odd little secondhand treasures. A crooked bookshelf, a mismatched armchair, a chipped mug that somehow became my favorite. These weren't signs of failure. They were signs of trying, of starting from nothing and still choosing to make something worth coming home to. I started writing again, not for an audience, just for myself. I wrote about what I lived through, about who I used to be and who I was becoming. I poured it all into notebooks, messy handwriting, scribbled out paragraphs, emotional detours. But every page brought me closer to a version of myself I actually liked. One that didn't shrink to keep someone else comfortable. And then, somewhere in the middle of all that growth, I reached out to Elise. I didn't know what I wanted from the message. I just knew that she'd seen me when no one else did, and that mattered. She replied within minutes. We grabbed coffee a few days later. Just coffee. No pressure. But it was the first conversation I'd had in a long time that didn't feel like walking on eggshells. We talked about everything: books, music, her failed engagement, my mediocre cooking skills. It felt human. We started texting more. Then weekly brunches became Saturday hikes. Then one afternoon, without fanfare, she reached across the table and took my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. And for once, I didn't overthink it. I just let it happen. Don't get me wrong. I didn't find love again and ride off into the sunset. This wasn't a romantic movie. But I did find something better. I found myself again. I found that being soft isn't weakness. That being loyal isn't a flaw. That silence, when used with purpose, can be louder than any scream. And that walking away, truly walking away, doesn't mean defeat. It means you finally chose yourself. I don't know what Mallory's doing now. I haven't checked. I don't care to. Maybe she spun a new story about how I overreacted or made things public. Or maybe, just maybe, she finally took a good hard look in the mirror. But that's her journey, not mine. Mine continues here, in a tiny apartment that smells like strong coffee and fresh paper, with mismatched furniture and imperfect walls. But everything in it is real, earned, chosen. And for the first time in years, so am I.